Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is kushalmehra. All right, today's discussion is on a very specific subject. My guest today had come up with a presentation which was titled Canada's Islamism Crisis, a Growing and Grave National Security Threat. And so what we're going to do in today's podcast, it's going to be a little different. It's going to be like a presentation. We'll go slide by slide, and then maybe later on I can ask my questions. So my guest's name today is Joe Adam George. Joe, before we start the presentation, first of all, welcome. And if this is your first time on the podcast, so tell everybody a little bit about your background.
Well, hello.
Sorry
Hello.
about sorry about that. Sorry about that. Just crashed on me just for a couple of minutes. Yeah, then thing like
Um,
crashed on me. So yeah, so like I was saying, this was your first time on the podcast. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're from, and why did you decide to do a detailed study into this?
sure, Kushal. Thank you, first of all, for having me on your show. It's an absolute pleasure, and really appreciate the work you're doing. And firstly, just before I get started about myself, I just want to express my condolences to the families of the victims at Pahalgam terrorist attack that happened yesterday in Jammu and Kashmir. It's very unfortunate, especially given that I focus on this area of Islamist extremism to see people die of it, um, and especially in the name of religion. So when you are systematically targeted just because of your religion, and in this case, Hindus were targeted by Islamists, it's very unfortunate. And I really hope that the Indian government would wake up and recognize the threat and deal with it as appropriate and necessary. And I hope the rest of the world is watching as well. Uh, But yes, to talk about myself, my name is Joe Adam George. I'm based in Ottawa, Canada. I'm a national security analyst with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, which is a policy think tank in Ottawa. And I also am a research lead on Islamist threats in Canada with the Middle East Forum, which is a US-based think tank. And as I'm primarily focused on Islamist threats in the West. Um, Also, I pay special attention to what's happening in Europe, um, the UK, and to a certain degree, to a significant degree as well, in the Middle East, with what's going on between Israel and Hamas, and South Asia as well. Of course, I also um, look into related trends on immigration, border security, um, human trafficking, drugs, you name the whole shebang that Islamists are into as well. So that's essentially what I focus on. I got into this space essentially because I grew up in the Middle East. Even though I'm of Indian origin, um, I lived in Muscat, Oman, and I'm quite wary of the sensitivities associated with extremism. And having had I was always passionate about national security and foreign policy, even though much of my career was in public relations and corporate communications. Um, but having dabbled in this space and also having worked in the parliament in Canada, as an advisor to the opposition party leader, two opposition party leaders, in fact, and advising them on foreign policy and cultural issues is something that I never thought had happened, but that's essentially how I came about Islamist extremism, and also because I noticed that after what happened in Israel on October 7th, 2023. Um, I realized that not many people recognize the threat up front. We assume that it was an issue with the whole conflict had to do with land and the conflicts that, or rather the riots and protests that you see on our streets play out across the world, especially in Canada, um, was in support of Palestine. I knew right from day one that it had nothing to do with Palestine. This had to do with Islamist extremism, um, and there were powers, um, Islamist powers that had a sway in what was going on. So, and that's essentially what I decided to do, Kushal. Focus my energy and my time uh, digging into Islamist groups in Canada and trying to raise awareness wherever I can, especially with the Americans. Since, as you know, in Canada, we are very lethargic when it comes to national security issues. So, if I decided if we can't get our act together, maybe getting the Americans to pay more attention to what's happening up north the border would change things.
Fair enough. Now, what we can do is I'll pull up the presentation now, and then we can go through each and every slide. So I'm going to go through it. Okay, so uh, take it over. We're going to start from Islam versus Islamism.
Sure. So it's always important to make the distinction that there is sometimes a tendency to conflate Islam with Islamism, but it's very important to make the distinction. So Islam is a 1400-year-old faith that includes a great range of sects and movements, as you're aware, Shia Sunnis, Ibadis, and a bunch of others as well. Islamism, on the other hand, which is the one that we're going to talk about in depth today, is a century old utopian radical political ideology that seeks to derive legitimacy from Islam in order to return to past caliphate era glories. That's what every Islamist seeks, including the terrorist groups, which include ISIS and Al Qaeda and so on. Fundamentally, all of them want to create a global caliphate, but how the approach that each of these groups take is different, and that's what something that we're going to dig into deeper. You can just move on to the next slide. Yeah. So this is very important as to how Islamists view history and geography. They're very twisted idea when it comes to history and geography. So, any land which was once inhabited or ruled by Muslims is, according to Islamists, Muslim territory forever. And a case in point, as you can see, the map and the tweet on the right is that of Spain, so which was once referred to as Al Andalus. So Muslims still have a lot of memories of how it was a Muslim country once. So there is a lot of emotions running among Islamists as to that they one day would like to see Spain reverted back to being a Muslim country. So when it comes to history and geography for Islamists, it doesn't matter whether these countries are today sovereign non-Muslim countries. Whether even India as well, or China for that matter. They consider them as anti-Islamic, and they consider their governments and their citizens as occupiers and oppressors. So for Islamists, there's nothing called, you know, there's no when they take over over land or a country, it's not they don't call that occupation. They only refer to it as liberation because they view themselves as liberators, not occupiers. And Islam is a liberating religion according to them. So if you look at anything today, the conflict ridden places in the world today. From Palestine to Kashmir to Andalusia or to the former Ottoman Empire occupied lands in Europe. Islamists believe that they are indigenous to these places, and that they it is their it is their birthright to get back to return to these places, and which is essentially the same case as you see with Palestine as well today, as to why it is in the mess that it is today.
A second order effect of this warped logic is actually a law that exists in India, which is the Waqf Act, which was just amended by the BJP government. And
Correct.
basically, they just make random claims about this is Waqf land, that is Waqf land, everything is Waqf land, and it's a part of a warped Islamist logic that
Right.
gets applied in many ways over here. So yeah, it's just stupid.
Yes.
All
So
right,
it
key features. So, yeah.
yeah, it's quite it's scary and hilarious at the same time when you look at
Yeah, I
how
mean, you can't help but
yeah,
laugh at the entire process
yeah,
because, I mean,
it's
when I was listening to the entire logic of people in India in defense of the Waqf Act, I was like, whether should I laugh, should I cry? I don't know, maybe both at the same time. It was just really weird.
yeah. No, it is. I found it very fascinating as to how these people, Islamists, how they like to co-opt certain words, and also I don't know if you have noticed this yourself, or any of our listeners have, but Islamists like to use the term revert. I don't know if you have noticed that. So if you, if even if a white person who was born Christian, um, converts to Islam, that person, I mean, Islamists say that he is actually reverting. They don't use the term convert to Islam. He's reverting because in their book, Islam, I mean, everybody is born Muslim. The world as it is Islam, is of Islam. And so if you were born Christian and you were raised up Christian, that is a wrong religion. You are simply reverting back to the natural order of things, which is being a Muslim again. So, because that's the natural way of life in their
Yeah,
book.
yeah, in their book, that is the default setting. If we were to
Yeah.
use
So,
some technological lingo, that's the default setting. So
yeah.
anything.
So
So let's talk about the
we
key features and goals now.
so Islamists, as we all know, they the fun. So what their objectives are to seek and to conquer and destroy the West. Anybody that they see as infidels or kuffars, as they like to call, by waging jihad. Anybody that is not like them. Now, this is not only limited to the West and Israel, or Jews and Christians. It also refers to other non-Muslim majority countries like India, China, or even your Gulf monarchies like your Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan as well. They consider all of them as colonial powers because in their book, these monarchies are illegitimate because they view anything from to do with liberalism, secularism, nationalism, are all considered as un-Islamic. So if Saudi is existing, even despite the fact that it is home to two of the holiest shrines, Islamic shrines, it is still considered as a legitimate kingdom because in their book, the only legitimate kingdom is that of a caliphate. Um, and which is why they all seek to go back to that medieval era caliphatic rule. Now, as I mentioned before, all these most of these terrorist groups, like your Hizb ut-Tahrir, ISIS, Al Qaeda, they also want to create their own versions of a global caliphate. Um, and just like the Muslim Brotherhood as well. How they go about it is very different. Um, while fundamentally they all wanted, this is their goal to take over foreign lands and convert them into Muslim lands. Their objective, or rather how they go about it, is very different. You have ISIS and Al Qaeda resort to violent jihad, whereas the other ones, like your Hizb ut-Tahrir and your Muslim Brotherhood, they go for a non-kinetic version of jihad known as stealth jihad to to transform societies from within and then take them over. So, in the original caliphate, which existed from around the 700s to the 1300s, both Muslims and non-Muslims were subject to Islamic Sharia law. Now, non-Muslims were treated as second-class citizens, or known as dhimmis. So, what dhimmis literally means, people of the book, which is essentially they referred to. Originally, it was referred to as Jews and Christians because Jews and Christians were the only people mentioned in their holy book of Quran. So, which is why it's people of the book. That's what it literally means. And so all these eventually, of course, as the caliphate expanded, it brought there were other religions that also were treated as dhimmis. Hindus were also amongst the dhimmis as well. So they were required to pay this jizya tax, which is essentially a protection, a tax that you pay your Muslim rulers in exchange for protection, and also a right to practice your religion. But otherwise, you pretty much do not have any benefits. Um, Now, Sharia law was the driving force, of, or everything was the basis of anything to run society back in the caliphate was Sharia law. Whether it was your economy, your how they practice the justice system, culture. So for Islamists, I'll give you an example of how the justice system works. If you were caught stealing, you were, as per their book, they would go. It was pretty radical. They would simply chop off your arm, so that the idea was that you would not repeat that crime again. So, and if you did, obviously they would chop off the other limb as well. So, so the idea was to use that, go to that extreme in order to act as a deterrent from preventing people from committing crime. So this is how extreme they, as per the Sharia law, they conducted justice. We can move on to the next one, Kushal. So these are some of the headlines from across the world of how Islamism looks like today. Um, you can see that no one is spared, no country, whether it's in Europe, Asia, or North America, the Islamists have definitely left their mark. Um, I was just reading an article from about a week ago in the UK. The UK, even the UK prisons are not safe anymore. They're forced, the guards in the prison are are forced to protect non-Muslim inmates. They're using them. They separated them from the Muslim inmates, and they put them in solitary confinement because the Muslim inmates were threatening them that if they do not convert to Islam, they would be badly beaten or even murdered. So even so Islamist Muslim Brotherhood gangs are now ruling the prisons in the UK. So you can imagine how bad the scene is. In fact, the brother of the terrorist behind the Manchester arena bombings, he who's in one of the prisons, he poured boiling oil on three police officers and attacked them with a knife that he made in his prison cell. It's talking about that levels of crazy. So that's going around the world, but then nobody still wants to address it. So you got problems all over the world. like this, which, like I said, I'm sure, and this is just not even the, as you can read from the headlines, this is not even the terror aspect of it. I've not even gone into the bombings and the use of vehicles or knives, anything of the sort. This is merely the stealth jihad aspect of it that these headlines are talking about. So you can imagine how much worse the terrorism aspect of it. I mean, I would run out of slides if I had to talk about that. So we can move on to the next one. So this is something that I want to talk about because jihad is often very, is often taken out of context or mistakenly translated as holy war in the West, and I think pretty much anywhere in the world. But that is not actually the accurate translation. What it literally means is a human struggle to promote good and to prevent evil. So for Islamists, this idea of promoting good and preventing evil is to spread the message of Islam and to destroy anybody who opposes them, and ultimately create an Islamic caliphate, which to them is promoting good, and preventing evil is destroying Western societies or anybody that is not like them. Now, as I mentioned before, terrorist groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda resort to the violent aspect of jihad, whereas the Islamists, like your Muslim Brotherhood and Hizb ut-Tahrir, they engage in a non-kinetic, silent, insidious, and a covert version of jihad, known as stealth jihad, popularly. So, which they deploy to essentially to destabilize institutions, to infiltrate key areas of government, to influence policy, so that they can destroy countries from within. So that's what we're going to fundamentally talk about today. So stealth jihad in action. So these are the various ways in which uh, Islamists like your Muslim Brotherhood and your Hizb ut-Tahrir of the world operate in the West. They infiltrate and influence political parties and elections through vote bank politics, which, Kushal, as you know, in Canada, this needs no mention. It's rampant in
Yeah,
Canada.
they're so rampant that the Canadian political system, whether the conservatives or the liberals, can't even use the word Islamism, India, or Hindu in a condemnation of the Kashmiri terrorist attack that just happened in the last 48 hours. First of all, Canada was the last of the G7 nations to actually even make a customary tweet. Well, the less we say, the better about Canada.
Exactly. Yeah, and so it is. There is a lot of pressure away, and to that point, they also run or try or support pro-Islamist candidates. Now, you don't even necessarily have to be an Islam pro-Islamist, and you don't even have to be a Muslim. You can be even somebody like Adam Cohen, the Liberal MP, who went and stood in a mosque and said that and started talking in support of Palestine and what he will do if he gets re-elected to appease the Muslims in the mosque. So, and that's all they care. They don't want you don't necessarily even have to be Muslim as long as you support their agenda and to effect policy changes that favor their community. That's all them. So you don't even have to be a Muslim or pro-Islamist for that matter. So, and then of course, this is something that they really love doing consistently in a woke country like Canada. Um, is exploit anti-racism and DEI, with and use the left as the useful idiots to do to go and to claim victimhood. So you've seen them co-opt all sorts of woke language, even take or pretend that their suffering is no different from the suffering of the indigenous people, um, and try and put themselves in the same bucket as indigenous people or the blacks. who went through slavery and so on. So this is what Islamists try and do: so play that victim game and then and run with it. So and then because the left is being such uh, lovely, useful idiots for these people, nobody questions them. And you're which is why you're seeing all this Islamophobia grift being such a success in Canada, because nobody questions it. And then they, by that same stretch, they indoctrinate children in schools with Islamist propaganda. I'll show you in the slides to come how they do that. Talk about slowly, subtly pushing in terms like Allahu Akbar and a bunch of other things, which is totally not required in our school system. So, but they do that under the guise of anti-Palestinian racism, which is another new vehicle that a term that they just created now, because it's a perfect scenario, a scenario for them after October 7th to play the victim card, even though they are the ones who started the war. So, and then of course, universities funding universities and the media. We've seen Qatar and Qatar do that through Al Jazeera. Qatar also
Yeah,
does the
Trump
same.
just signed an executive order today, I think, about this foreign funding of universities,
Yeah,
where America is going to ask universities to share the details.
yeah. See, the Americans are way ahead of the game. We in Canada, I've tried to dig into university and college records to see the funding sources, and you can't see it. It's actually a provincial jurisdiction, just to be clear. Education is, that is, and I haven't found anything. There is no transparency. No, there is no record keeping of any kind. So we do not know who is so Al Qaeda. For all we know, could be paying into UFT, and no one would be batting an eyelid because it's money at the end of the day. So who cares where it is coming from? So there's no questions asked. So we do not know where this fund. A lot of the funding happens in Canada, and that's something that I'm hoping that whichever government comes in next takes hopefully rectifies that problem, because that is a serious problem. We have, I know we're in college, as a university, as an Islamic center that's been set up. So so there are similarly other universities which are willing to open up Islamic centers to push Muslim Brotherhood propaganda, which is totally unnecessary. It's no different from the Confucius institutes that the Chinese Communist Party uses to push communist propaganda and pro-China propaganda. So we don't need that in Canada. Then again, you got lawfare, which is every time somebody somebody like me writes an article about them, or tries to a journalist writes about finds some wrongdoing that Islamists or their allies are indulging in, you get sued into silence, because, as you know, defamation cases are very expensive. If you are defending yourself, it's very expensive to hire a lawyer to defend yourself um, from defamation in Canada, at least, in the West at least.
So
So
basically, lawfare is a strategy that is used by Islamists everywhere in the world. Where they use it in UK, they use it in Canada too. I don't know what they do in America, but I know it for sure that they use it in Canada, in UK, and I think that's something that even the Khalistanis do. So they have something in common.
absolutely, yeah, they don't mind that, even if this thing gets they lose in court. The idea is that they have ruined your life, their individual's life, or at least left him broke. So these are some of the tactics that they use, and then they lobby for laws to criminalize Islamophobia, which again is happening. We tried it with M103, in Canada, which you might know of, which was pushed by the Pakistani MP from Mississauga. Her name escapes me, but I'm sure you know who I'm referring to. Ikra Khalid. Ikra
Ikra,
Khalid,
Ikra.
yeah, Ikra Khalid pushed that, and well, it was a non-binding motion, but the point is, she set it in play. So the thing is, all next time these guys really
Oh
want
yeah,
to,
it is non-binding right now,
yes,
and then it
exactly.
becomes
But
binding in the future. It's a
yeah,
slow concept creep.
yeah. So the thing is, you just keep pushing it until that's what the Islamists are very smart in how they do things. Like they keep pushing, trying to test your boundaries by pushing it only so much so that, and finally, you just to make them happy, you just accept it, and then they keep pushing it. The next election comes around, and they keep pushing it. And now, of course, you have an Islamophobia guide that the government put out last month, courtesy of our Islamophobia czar, Amir Al Gawabi, as well. So it's only a matter of time when you're going to see what's happening in the UK, because now in the UK there's a parliamentary body studying um, whether they can or they should criminalize Islamophobia. So it's only a matter of time that the same stuff will happen in Canada as well. And then again, then the other stealthier bit, which I think a lot of folks know of, is achieving critical mass in Muslim population numbers through mass immigration and high birth rates to control and influence politics and culture. Now, this critical mass, if people are wondering what critical mass is, that is a certain percentage of the total population in a country. So that is, in the case for Islamists, they deem that number to be anywhere to be at least between 5 to 10%, depending on the population of the country that they live in. For example, in Canada, the Muslim population is about 5%. Um, so, which is and which given our population size of 42 million, it's a pretty sizable number. So 5% of 42, you're looking at. Please help me with math here, but I'm is that roughly about uh, 3 million, 4 million,
Yeah, you know what was
2 million,
fascinating?
2 million, yeah, 2.5 to 3 million, yeah. So
What was
there you go.
fascinating is this website that I came across in Canada. I'm gonna put up the link, and this is the level of planning. Look at this, muslimsvote.ca. I don't know if you've come across this
Yes,
one.
I'm aware of these guys. They
Oh
are
my freaking
Muslim.
lord.
Muslim.
Every
I thought it's
single
Muslim.
riding, they tell you which candidate to vote for if you're a Muslim in every single riding in Canada. Every single riding. Somebody's telling you who to vote for. You just can't compete with this until you copy them and ape them. You just can't.
Yeah. No, this is definitely a form of election interference because groups like Muslim Vote, where they get the funding and so on, is highly questionable. So, but I don't see if there's an appetite in the government of the day to look into that. So, so I think, but Muslim Vote is active in the UK. They were very influential in the UK elections last year and helped. Not just certain Labour candidates to win, but they helped certain a number of Muslim guys who ran as independents to win as well. So you can see that they are pretty influential. I mean, they are quite impactful, at least in the UK. They may not have reached that level yet in Canada, but it's only a matter of time again, like I said. And I know that they're doing a similar running a similar campaign in Australia as well, because the Australians, as you know, are having the elections, federal elections, sometime next month, if I'm not mistaken, or the month after. So, the Australians are going to be facing some heat from the Islamists as well. And just moving
Listen,
on. So,
these
sorry.
strategies are a direct assault on fiercely individualistic ideologies that
Yes,
have, you know, been there in the West. The problem with this is you why this works, and this happens in India too, by the way.
Mm.
What
Yeah.
happens is that when you have one set of people who are working and thinking as individuals and voting as individuals, and then you have this other set just votes as a block, you just can't win. Either you vote as a block and counter that, which is, to be very honest, what has happened in India now. Finally, a substantial number of Hindus too have started voting as a block, and now you have a political change in India, which is where the BJP comes into power. In many places the BJP gets into power is because in the northeast it's the Christians that vote for the BJP. Yes, people don't realize that in northeast India it is the Christians that are voting in giant hordes for the BJP. In other parts of India, it is the Hindus that are voting for the BJP. In some parts of India, like in Punjab, yes, the Sikhs don't vote, but in outside Punjab, the Sikhs vote for the BJP. And it has Indian politics is now riddled with group voting patterns. You can literally point out where in India who's going to vote for whom. There are pockets of people. So, but this happens is because I'm saying it openly. The Islamists have actually they have weaponized democracy, and they have, what they have done is, in my opinion, they have changed the locus from the individual to the group. And when the locus, the default setting, goes from the individual to the group, all this bullshit that you're talking about happens.
No, exactly. So they act when it comes to voting patterns, they act as one monolith, which is scary. Because I haven't seen, as I think we mentioned before, I haven't seen any community or any religious group who is as coordinated as the Islamists in putting together the Muslim vote, and which is why it's so hard to make that to move or get around vote bank politics in Canada, because the politicians know how influential the Muslim vote is. So, and which is why they're willing to tear tear apart decades of foreign policy, which was always, to support Israel, in to benefit the Muslim vote. I mean, because the Jews are only a fraction of the Muslim population in Canada. So why would you care about the Jews when the Muslims are about 4 to 5 times their size? So you obviously know you're going to bat. I mean, you're going to go and support the big guys. So yeah, and that's what essentially you're seeing here, and I think it's going to continue, keep trending like that in future, unless political parties make the conscious effort to you know get rid of vote bank politics, which I'll be honest with you is never going to happen in Canada. I just don't simply see it. Anybody, um, you know, or raising their hand up and saying, "Hey, this is not going to go well for our country. Let's get people to put Canadian interests first, and keep aside all sorts of vote bank politics and appeasement policies." That's simply not going to happen. I don't foresee that. Just moving on as well, like, again, Islamists, it's not just a nostalgia that they do, is also, I mean, because they need to fund their activities, they also engage in criminal activities like drug trafficking, money laundering, immigration fraud, anything. And I'll take an example of Hezbollah. Hezbollah has been involved in the drug trafficking business, especially fentanyl production in Canada, since the 2000s. And but before that, Hezbollah was already operational in Canada since the 1990s, and they have huge support from the Shia Lebanese community, because, as you know, Hezbollah is a Lebanese terrorist group. So they have a lot of sympathy with the Shia Lebanese community here in Canada, and many members of these group of the community actually support Hezbollah by fundraising. They engage in immigration fraud, all sorts of racketeering, you name it. So all that happens here, and the funds that are raised here in Canada are then used to support insurgencies like the one you're seeing play out in the Middle East now against Israel or anything against the West, all that money comes from Canada, is raised from Canada. The money laundering and so on that you see. Um, and then this is a personal favorite of mine. What they do is create charities as cover to push propaganda, radicalize vulnerable Muslims, and also support fellow Islamists and terrorist groups abroad using taxpayer dollars. And this is what, and this is where I've seen there is general apathy from the on the government's part to address this problem. There have been a number of charities across the West, even in Canada, that have been caught funneling money to terrorist groups, but the government is not willing to take action. I'll give you an example. ISNA, which is the Islamic Society of North America, one of the biggest, I mean, it's a Muslim Brotherhood front group, well known Muslim Brotherhood group here in North America, operations in US and Canada. ISNA was caught, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 2019. There was a global news report by Stuart Bell that they funneled money, taxpayer money, to support Hizbul Mujahideen, the terrorist group in South Asia, which is very active, as you know, in Kashmir. And this is a terrorist group listed, or rather, listed terrorist group in Canada. Now, given the the gravity of the crime, there should have been an automatic ban of ISNA in Canada. But no, that did not happen. And instead, all they got was a slap on the wrist. So CRA just gives them a 1 year suspension and tells them, and they come back after a year of the suspension, and they continue getting taxpayer dollars by, I mean, courtesy of the Trudeau government. So, if I'm not mistaken, by my count, in the last 3 or 4 years, they have received at least 1.2 million Canadian dollars taxpayer money, despite the fact that they were caught funneling money to Hizbul Mujahideen. So, so it's just ridiculous when you hear things like this. It just makes your blood boil. That the government does not take. You can see that this is how vote bank politics play, and the government does not take extremism seriously. So some of the institutions, this is pretty. I'll just leave it out there for our listeners. These are some of the institutions that are targeted by stealth jihad, which we have covered in the previous slide as well: education, law enforcement, and so on. The Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah, these are the guys we need to talk about because these guys um, are the biggest troublemakers. I like to call them the mothership of the modern Islamist movement. Any group that you see involved in stealth jihad in the West today has its roots and its influence from the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, this is the world's largest and most influential Islamist organization that we're talking about. It was founded in Egypt in 1928 by a school teacher and imam called Hassan al-Banna. And it is a listed terrorist entity by Egypt, Bahrain, Saudi, UAE, Austria, and Russia. And earlier today, Jordan became another country to list the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist group. You might have seen that in the news. The Muslim Brotherhood, now, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood, like I said, it's it's the fountainhead of modern day Islamism. So its radical ideology is profoundly influential for not just your covert or stealth jihad groups, but also for your terror groups like your Hamas, Al Qaeda, ISIS, and Hizb ut of the world. So um, the the chief ideologue of the Muslim Brotherhood, his name is Sayyid Qutb. He's considered as the father of Salafi jihadism, and that, as you know, that particular strain of jihadism is what drives groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda today. So, so Muslim Brotherhood has it for everybody. Whether you want to do stealth jihad, They have a doctrine for that. And if you want to commit violent jihad, you there's a doctrine, separate doctrine for that as well. So, which is why it brings me to my next point. It serves as a bridge for aspiring Islamists to become violent jihadists. So, um, so if you want, so whatever is your cake, if you want to do it the stealthy way, they have the heart for that as well. And if you want to take up guns and bombs, then they have a doctrine for that as well. So, uh, and Qatar and Turkey are its biggest state-backed sponsors. There used to be, of course, the Saudis and Egypt and UAE and all used to engage with the Muslim Brotherhood a long time back, but then they found out that the Muslim Brotherhood was trying to indoctrinate uh, the youth uh, after infiltrating their education system. So the Arabs smartened up and booted out Muslim Brotherhood and listed them as a terrorist group. But somehow here in the West, no one really cares what they do under our noses. So Muslim Brotherhood treats everybody. Um, Kushal, you, me, the West, the Americans, especially America, as enemies of Allah. So, and of course, I forgot Israel as well. So they, so even though the group renounced violence in the 1970s, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but Muslim Brotherhood was responsible for the assassination of an Egyptian prime minister and the attempted assassination of another one named Gamal Nasser, if you remember. Of course, Nasser survived, and then he rounded up a lot of the Muslim Brotherhood guys and imprisoned them. One of them was Hassan al-Banna and Said Qutb. Hassan al-Banna died in prison. So so this group uses, like I said before, their go-to strategy is stealth jihad, which they want in order to create a global caliphate. Now, they are they um, are very active across the globe. They have affiliates in over 70 countries, including Canada, and they are disguised as mosques, community centers, and charities and Islamic schools, because their idea is that they pretend to be purveyors of social service. They pretend, so the idea behind, they use this garb of being, a charitable organization, or like whatever they're doing is for social good, uh, and so on. But inherently and fundamentally, they use anything they can to push Islamist propaganda. And that is something that Western governments haven't recognized yet. They're still coming to terms, because for the West, what I've found is it's very easy for them to stop a terror attack. That's not. I think the West has come to a point. Western security agencies have learned how to do that, which is why they're pretty successful in stopping a lot of these terror attacks, whether it's through bombs, guns, or vehicles, and so on. But when it comes to the stealth part of it, Western security agencies um, are struggling to wrap their heads around how these guys do that. Because to them, they think that this is simply not possible. The takeover of institutions and trying to influence and so on, it simply cannot be possible in their book. Um, and because and these Islamists do a good job in screaming Islamophobia anytime somebody talks about it. So, which is why they get away with stealth jihad as opposed to violent jihad. So we can move on to the next one. So these are some of the quotes. I just leave it out there, but you get a sense of how extreme this group is, and their deep-rooted hatred for the West and for all non-Muslims. Of course, the very first quote of his itself will explain, um, what I was referring to. Jihad means the fighting, the fighting of the unbelievers, and involves all possible efforts that are necessary to dismantle the power of the enemies of Islam, including beating them, plundering their wealth, which means using charities to take taxpayer money and you funnel that money to push, to propagate insurgencies in some other part of the world or support terrorist groups, whether it is in Kashmir or Palestine, destroying their places of worship. You've seen many of these Islamists. I don't know if you've seen videos where these guys are celebrating, the take buying of a church. They said, "Oh, this used to be a church before. Now we are converting it into a mosque." So for them, that is a matter of pride. I don't know if you've seen videos like that, Kushal, but for them, it's a
Yeah,
big,
I've seen
big
videos
matter.
like that in
Yeah,
the United Kingdom. I mean, for me, the
yeah.
most telling scene was Taliban breaking the Bamia Buddhas in Afghanistan. That was pretty telling.
Yes, so that's exactly anything that's non-Muslim. You can see, which is why you're seeing prayers happen outside the Notre Dame Cathedral in Montreal, um, the church in England. It escapes me in London. Why these people hold prayers there as well? Because that's a way to say that one day these churches will become mosques. It's a prayer of conquest, um, and so on. So we can move on to the next slide, please. The next one. This is it's a video, but Islamism in Canada. It's not a new phenomenon. Definitely not. Existed for decades. In '98, a former CSIS chief, Dave Elcock, had said in a Senate committee hearing that there were at least over 50 terror groups, not all of them Islamists, of course. Some of them included the likes of your LTT and so on. Um, but the vast majority of them were Islamist groups, terrorist groups, which are active in Canada, including Hezbollah and Hamas. So, of course, like I mentioned before, these were some of the activities that these groups engaged in. Anything from logistical and material support for terrorist acts, fundraising, and then pushing propaganda amongst their communities and so on. Um, and many of these acts conducted by these groups and individuals were directly linked to major terror acts around the world. The 1993 New York World Trade Center bombing, and of course, I'm sure Indians know about 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks. Tawahul Rana was a Pakistani Canadian doctor uh, who was the mastermind, one of the masterminds behind the terror attacks in Mumbai. So all of them have a link to Canada. Now, in 2011, Macdonald-Laurier Institute study on Muslim public opinion found that only a small minority of Canadian Muslims unequivocally reject Hamas, Hezbollah, or the Iranian regime, and 35% of those um, polled failed to fully reject Al Qaeda, which is very worrying. Um, and and mind you, this is in 2011, which is pre-ISIS days. So, because ISIS did not come into the picture until about 2013, if you remember, at its peak, 2013, 2014. So, a lot has happened since ISIS came in the fray during the Syrian civil war, and so as a result, these figures are likely to be much higher today because you got, I mean, forget ISIS, you got youth radicalization, uncontrolled immigration, the poor cultural and social integration of the Muslim youth as well, and then, of course, the availability of online propaganda, and, of course, the ongoing Israel Hamas conflict as well. So, all of these would have added fuel to the fire. And so you're looking at significantly higher numbers um, of of youth and of people having, very pro-terror views in Canada today, which is very concerning. Because even if it's in the UK, I was reading a Pew report that that about 35. I can't remember the exact percentage. I don't want to quote, but I remember that um, it said of the certain percentage calculated of the total Muslim population in the UK, 120,000 of them uh, considered that believe that they can, agreed with the idea that they can violently convert the UK into an Islamic caliphate. So you're talking about 120,000 Muslims okay with the fact that you can use violence as means to install an Islamic caliphate in the UK, which is a very worrying number of people, 120,000 living among you. So, so this is what you're dealing. Similar figures that you can expect to look at in Canada as well. Um, And finally, as I mentioned here, the Muslim Association of Canada, which is Canada's largest grassroots charity, Muslim charity, is openly affiliated to the Muslim Brotherhood. If you go to the website, you can read about that on their FAQs page. They don't mention the Muslim Brotherhood now because they got pulled up by RCMP and CRA. So now they mention Hassan al-Banna. But that's pretty ridiculous because that's like saying, I don't ascribe to Al Qaeda, but I believe in Osama bin Laden. Then you can't distinguish between the two of them. So, but yeah, that's what they mention on the website now, and that's about it. Yeah. These are just these are figures from Middle East Forum report published last year on the breakup of taxpayer money given to the top five Islamist groups in Canada. Like I mentioned earlier about ISNA has got received 1.2 million so far in the up until 2023, at least from my calculation. So, and of course, the figure is much higher now because we haven't accounted for 2023 and 2024 and 2023 and 2024. So these groups have gotten a collective amount of 43 million between 2019 and 2022. That's a very significant number. And mind you, Kushal, these are not the only Islamist groups operating in Canada. There are much. There are many more. The Middle East Forum has simply taken the top five groups in Canada. So you're looking at probably well in excess of $100 million easily. So, and this is just taxpayer money. These people get money from corporate donations and from other sources, private donors. So we're talking about tens of millions of dollars being funneled for Islamist activity, not just in Canada, but also elsewhere, like terrorists, supporting terrorists across the globe and so on. We can move on to the next one. Yeah, so why is Canada such a favorite for Islamists? Uh, Excessive political correctness. I don't think that's pretty self-explanatory, so I'll leave it there. Woke culture, we talked about it. They love it, which is why they are such friends of the left. Likes to think that Islamists are their buddies, but they know that when the time comes, when the Islamists have significant power, the first people they'll throw under the bus are the leftists. And if they don't believe me, they can just look at the Minnesota city of Hamtramck. If you know, in the U.S., what came of that of the LGBTQ community at Hamtramck after the left helped elect an all-Muslim city council. How these guys rewarded them is they pulled down the pride flag. They banned the pride flag, and that city became extremely unsafe for LGBT people. These are the same people who helped elect these fellows into power, and then they had to suffer for it. But like I said, history somehow keeps repeating for the left in this regard. They don't seem to learn the lesson. So the the Islamists, use the same stuff from the leftist playbook, which is historical revisionism, identity politics, victimhood. They love it because that's how they thrive off it as well. Then, of course, our Canadian, thanks to our government and also our official policy on multiculturalism, we have this obsession with multiculturalism, vote bank politics, and community appeasement. That, like we talked about before, that's never going to go away, I feel.
It for the record, for those who don't know, it's an official statecraft. It was
It was Pierre Trudeau.
made, yeah, by Pierre
1970s.
Trudeau in the 80s. And there is a minister of diversity in Canada. I don't know what that minister is supposed to do, but there is a minister of diversity.
Yeah. We're the first country in the world to put out multiculturalism as an official policy, state policy. So, yeah, it was, I think, in the late 70s that it came out. Yeah. So, then, of course, moving on, the general government apathy towards national security. Our government couldn't care to whether it's Islamists or the Chinese Communist Party, or the Khalistanis. They couldn't care less. So, and also that uh, also flows down to regular Canadians as well. Unlike Americans, Canadians are not really glued into national security issues, and which is why they do not care, and which is really strange because, I mean, and what really I find frustrating and bewildering is they consider Trump to be much of a security threat to Canada than yeah, any Islamist terrorist, which is quite laughable. But this is where we are as a country today, unfortunately. And then you got unchecked immigration policies. Again, limited integration, very poor background checks done by the government. We know all the stories, Kushal, as you know, we read the papers time in, time out again. We saw last year the ISIS father and son case. Again, no back. You just brought in a guy. No, even though there was a video of him beheading somebody somewhere, they we gladly accepted him as one of our own. Gave him citizenship as well, and there he is. He and his son were planning to conduct a mass terror attack in
Didn't
downtown
Justin
Toronto.
Trudeau say a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian?
Absolutely, yes.
And
So
he said we should bring all those ISIS folks back. We can reform them or something of that sort.
yeah,
It
but
was some weird logic.
that's yes, but people don't realize that the the British and the French actually had de-radicalization programs, which they admitted were not effective. Um, it's a failed program. This old notion that jihadists can be de-radicalized is very unlikely. Yes, there is the odd one or two cases, but for the most part, it is an absolute failure. Um, so yeah, I mean, so anyway, Trudeau being Trudeau, I think the less said the better. But just moving on as well, and of course, this the next one is emblematic of Trudeau. What Trudeau said, the lack of patriotism and national identity, um, which, like, when you say that Canada is a post-national state, and you can be anybody can be everybody can be anybody. You say stuff like that, obviously you're not going to get anywhere as a country. And Islamists, like I mentioned in my one of my earlier slides, they hate nationalism. So for them, the fact that Canadians are not patriotic or nationalistic is good news for them because it makes their job much easier. Because a divided nation works in their favor. So and that's why they thrive in a country like Canada. And of course, these are the bunch of groups that are friends and allies of Islamists. We know the communist lefties, neo Nazis, the far right, Khalistanis. Of course, Khalistanis, since we have an Indian audience here, the Khalistanis and Islamists have a common enemy when it comes to India. Of course, on the Kashmir issue and Khalistan issue. And then, of course, any friend of India is
Khalistan is an Islamist project. It's a Pakistani project.
absolutely, oh yeah. I mean, but then again, the thing is that they have shared interests. I mean, India is a common enemy, and also that any friend of India is automatically also an enemy of theirs as well, like Israel or America. So it makes it much easier for them as well, for the Islamists. So the Khalistanis pretty much carry water for the Islamists and do their dirty work here in Canada. Then you got your Mexican drug cartels, like I said, talking about fentanyl, the transnational organized crime gangs, and the Chinese triads. All of these guys are connected in supporting the Islamists here in Canada, especially like your terror groups like Hezbollah and so on. I remember a former RCMP officer telling me that every time, I mean, he used to work closely with the DEA in the US and so on fentanyl and drugs and so on. And he was telling me that every time they noticed that a Mexican drug cartel guy was flying into Vancouver. It was to meet with guys with the Iranians and the Chinese. Why? Because these were the guys with the money. So So you can see that this is Canada is a hub for all sorts of criminal elements. Whether it's the Iranian Islamists in Iran, or the Chinese triads, or even the Mexican drug guys. So just moving on to the next one. Yeah, so all Islamists seek to destabilize Canada. This is, infiltrate government and law enforcement agencies. To the left, this is a podcast. As if you remember, Kushal, the infamous.
Yeah, they removed it eventually and they had to
No,
apologize. But god damn, how could they
no.
even have a podcast like this?
See,
Like, even India would think 100 times before doing this.
no, but this is like the fact that they thought it was okay to actually go on air, these two Muslim cops, and talk about it. So that itself, that brag, the way in which they brag, tells you need to understand how motivated the Islamists are. They wear the ideology on their sleeves. They are not ashamed of it, and that's why people do not understand. These people are telling you who they are. So you need to believe them. And still, people in the West refuse to understand. I mean, the threat is right there in front of their faces, and then they still do not want to do anything about it, which is so disappointing. I mean, for somebody doing focus on national security, it's very frustrating. Like, what more can you uh, say? I mean, these people are literally telling you what they intend to achieve. These two cops, no less, that they're very excited to see people come to Islam after October 7th. Really? Like, is that what your job is as a police officer? So, so yeah. So there is they are unashamed about their ideology and what they intend to achieve in our society. And see, and here is another one, the Amira Al Gawabi, our Islamophobia czar, bragging about the Muslim population. This is a most viral post on LinkedIn. And what is the most viral post on LinkedIn? The fact that she reposted a Statistics Canada post on the Muslim population increasing, more than doubling in 20 years in Canada. That's the most viral post, and she's very excited about it. There is another one. So see these characters. They already are telling you what they intend to do here in Canada, but nobody wants to address this. But yeah, just the next one, Michelle. Yeah, influence elections and policies. As you can see, I'm all of this, Salma Zaid, all of them, Gaza. Um, this essentially, this election is all about Gaza for the Muslim community. If no one is supporting Palestine in this issue, they are going to get voted out of power. They're not going to get the Muslim vote. They've made it very clear. You're not going to get invited to any of the mosques, and if you do not address Islamophobia, you're not going to get the vote either. So they have made it very clear. And as you can see in the center, one such group, um, which was representing Canadian Muslim donors, they stopped giving the Liberal Party any funds because they were not happy with the Gaza position. So they will do what they can to persuade and coerce parties to toe their line. Next one. Yes, we talked about this before, so I'll just leave it there. But as you know, fundamentally, it is to use our own Charter of Rights and our constitutional laws to curb and to use Islamophobia, so that anybody like me, who addresses Islamist extremism is treated as an Islamophobe, so then they can shut me down and try and silence me.
Is there a way? Is there a guide of Islamophilia, or it's just for Islamophobia?
Uh, as of now, unfortunately, this unless I come up with something else. Uh, um, but yeah, this is the one on the left, the Canadian guide. As I mentioned, it is courtesy of Amira Al Gawabi. As you can see at the bottom, it is written Office of the Special Representative on Combating Islamophobia, which is none other than Amira Al Gawabi's office. So she is the one behind this. So essentially, you can't say anything. Whereas even if you say that Osama bin Laden is a terrorist, you can be sued. They'll accuse you of bigotry.
Can I just say something? Like, I'm seeing all the slides you're sharing. This is literally the modus operandi of the Khalistanis. Like over here, I can tell you, anything you do, every time you criticize the Khalistani, they'll be like, "Oh, you're anti-Sikh," but I did not even use the word Sikh. In fact, I am Punjabi. I'm very pro-Sikh. I'm anti-Khalistani. You guys are a problem. You guys are a problem for everyone. And it's you can remove this, and I could actually fit examples of Khalistanis, and it is the literal same modus operandi.
No, won't be
Everything is the same to the last bit.
Yeah, like people forget that our enemies have very similar rule books. China, for example, the Chinese Communist Party's takeover of, the playbook of taking over the world, and taking over the West is 100-year plan.
Yeah.
And so do the Islamists. The Islamists also have 100-year plan. There is literally a video in this presentation where there is a US based, it's called CARE. I'm sure you know of CARE, the
Yeah, I
Council
know
of American
that
Islamic
organization.
Relations, which is the
Yeah,
largest
I know.
Muslim Brotherhood organization in America. But the guy is bragging that they want to run as many Muslim candidates as possible so that they can
Mhm.
eventually take over the USA. Even if it does not happen in the next 5-10 years, they want to turn the US into an Islamic nation in the next 100 years. So they are so
Yeah,
explicit about it.
yeah.
Um, Istan, yeah. See, this is for pushing for poorly unvetted mass immigration. This
Again,
is
literally something that the Khalistanis do. They
yeah,
work like I can give you the example, the Canadian example. Motion M44, by the way, voted and approved by every single political party in Canada. It was a unanimous vote. What
yeah,
did it ask for? Temporary workers. Yo, I was a student to Canada. I did not work 40 hours a week. What the hell? You can't be a student and work 40 hours a week. That means you're falsely migrating to Canada under the garb of being a
yeah.
student. This is all the diploma mills. That was What was that?
Absolutely.
All of it. So it's again Muslim Brotherhood doing the same thing.
Yeah, for them it's a numbers, not to take
Yeah.
for takeover, to build critical mass. Like I said, either it's mass immigration or high birth rates. It's these two ways in which they want to take over a country. Um, the next one. So, oh yeah, indoctrinating kids to normalize Islamism. Once the one thing we found out was anti-Palestinian racism, which we talked about. Then in the center, you can see this is a copy of from a book, a page from a book that a Muslim group was trying to lobby to have it in the libraries of schools in Toronto. So you can see the first one itself, Alhamdulillah, an Arabic word. It means all praises to Allah. So these are the kind of things they want to try and push on kids to try and normalize and make Islam more accepting, and so on. On the slide on the left, of course, you got World Hijab Day, which we got women in Iran who are being murdered. People in Iran also being murdered, men and women, for protesting against the hijab, wearing the hijab. And here in the West, ironically, you got liberals uh, forcing students to try out the hijab as though it is an it is something very empowering for women.
Yeah, it's the next fashion fad, right? I mean, it's
So
just morons.
so so yeah. So you got on one hand you got poor Iranians dying, uh, and you got liberals here who think that it's something of a fad. And then right above that is this guy who was an imam in a mosque talking about um, about finishing Israel, and these are the kind of guys that the Toronto District School Board invites to speak at schools. So imagine what is he going to be telling the kids about this, about the conflict? What do you think he's going to be teaching the kids? So and then at the bottom right here is the Muslim Association of Canada. They're going to open this fall. Canada's first ever Islamic college is going to become operational come September. And what I find very hilarious is at the bottom of it, I don't know, it's not very legible, but I'll read out to you. It says, um, could you scroll that up a bit because I lost it now? Um, it's just, yeah, CIC's Honors Bachelor of Arts in Islamic Studies will give our our students a solid grounding in the liberal arts from an Islamic perspective. Liberal arts from an Islamic perspective. That's like saying I'm going to do physical exercise by taking food from the plate and putting it in my mouth. That's you're talking about liberal arts and from an Islamic perspective. That's an oxymoron. You know, they contradict each other.
Yeah, it's
They're trying
chickens
to
for KFC.
yeah. So like saying is trying to portray Islam as being liberal. It's simply liberating religion. So
Yeah. I mean,
uh,
as an atheist, I find this hilarious, but
but you can see how they try and push
yeah, I
kids
know.
into all of this nonsense. And then yeah, this is very worrying.
Oh my God. Like, for fuck's sake, when will the weekend protests in Canada stop? Seriously. I mean, it's like every week there is a Gaza protest, and then every third week there is a Khalistan protest. Like, fuck, seriously, just stop this shit now. Like, when will we have normal functioning roads in Canada and sidewalks? Like, when?
This is yeah, it's become too much. I mean now it's part and parcel. And so now, it doesn't really bother me anymore because, and I said from the beginning, this is never about Palestine. There's
No,
something
but
more
they
pushing
heckle the
stuff.
average person, right? If the average person makes a face,
Yeah,
they'll start coming and heckling the average person. Like, I'm sorry, I don't feel for your cause. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, just leave
exactly.
me the heck alone.
And yeah, and then they like and then they do the stunts like you have Muslim PhD students talking about portraying terrorism as a legitimate act of resistance. It's so scary. See this paper on the left, for example.
Yeah, I know.
uh, it's create understanding the construction of the Muslim terrorist in the policy process. To read the abstract, it's essentially saying that Muslim terror, the Islamist terror extremism, is a white people construct. So you can see they're using again co-opting left language, this woke language, to try and justify Islamist extremism.
Yeah,
That
it's any kind of rubbish.
that
See, the thing with postmodernism is it's like a proper word salad generator.
yeah, no, exactly.
So
And but there you go. This is a paper, which, by the way, Amira El Gawabi commented on it, saying that she congratulated this lady, one of the authors of that paper, and said she's looking forward to reviewing it on LinkedIn. I have a screenshot of that as well.
oh my
Um,
freaking
this
lord.
and then one on the right. See, this is another one. This PhD candidate from Palestine. Um, yeah, she's Palestinian. Yes, she's saying the impact of. She did a seminar just 2 months ago, which talked about the impact of terrorism designations of Palestinian advocacy in Canada. So essentially, she's saying terror groups like Hezbollah and Hamas are legitimate resistance groups, and that by listing them as terrorist groups, you're undermining Palestinian advocacy. So, what do you tell such people? That this
You
is a
tell them they're retards. You tell them they're retards. That's all you tell them. There is no other
but
language for such people.
but this is where we are at now. So yes, this is pretty much what I like. I've said it's where we are in Canada. Very very scary because
Yeah,
you
and
saw
for
what
those
happened
who
in the
think
UK.
Canada only has a Khalistan problem, it has a Khalistan problem, it has a Islamism problem, and it has an even bigger Chinese Communist Party problem. It has all the problems of Canada. The
Yeah,
murderer of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman also lives in Toronto.
yeah, yeah. So it's scary.
Yeah,
Yeah, on one hand you see
Canada is
stuff.
crazy.
And so this is pretty much it. I'll just leave. This is pretty much it.
Yeah, these are just
It's close.
articles. I understand. They're self-explanatory. Like, oh my
So
freaking
yeah,
lord.
that's pretty much it. And I think the last slide I can just show the next one because that could. So, I mean, this is but there is a bunch of videos after this, but I'll just leave it at this. But you saw from many of the slides what the Islamists themselves say in their own words, like what they intend on doing. So, I love this quote by Maya Angelou. Like, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. So that's essentially. So this is so applicable to Islamists. I use this quote on every slide. Every time that I do a presentation on Islamism, I show them because this is people need to know. The Islamists are screaming at their faces, saying that, "Hey, we're going to. This is what
Yeah,
we are going to do
yeah,
to
we
you
hate
guys.
you.
Yeah, this is what we're going to do to you. We're going to do this to your daughters and your sons. We're going to take
Ugh.
over. Uh, and no problem. The West doesn't care uh, somehow.
So
So,
I'll tell you what's going to happen eventually. Because it's almost an hour and a half, and we have to wrap up too. My biggest fear is this is how Islamists, Khalistanis, and such groups are going to control discourse. The one thing they don't like is free speech.
yeah,
One of the biggest reasons they lose in America is America has the First Amendment, and you can literally walk down any corner in America and you can say what you want to say. And if you're in a Republican state, all bets are off. All
yeah,
bets are off, literally. And it's a good thing about America, which is why I was looking at a Pew poll recently where when it comes to kids being born Muslim, only 25%, only 75% of them remain Muslim, or 72, 73%. They lose faith. Why? Because America has free speech. Ideas get challenged. People become atheists. Like I'm an atheist, so I can relate to this. It's because you have freedom. Canada used to be like that. Canada used to have freedom. Now what is happening is with the hate speech bill. What do you think the hate speech bill was pushed by? Who do you think is pushing the hate speech bill in Canada? It's the Islamists in Canada that are pushing the hate speech bill, aided and abetted by the Khalistanis. These are the two groups that are pushing the hate speech bill. And any well meaning Canadian, Hindu, Christian, Muslim, who's not Islamist, anybody who loves freedom, they should oppose such concept
Yeah,
creeps on our life.
yeah.
We should all oppose it. Whether it's you or me.
No,
I mean,
absolutely.
I'm an atheist and you're a Christian, but we should oppose it together because it's about our freedom.
Yeah, even if it's speech that is, we find offensive. But I won't. If somebody wants to criticize Jesus or the Bible and stuff, or may mock them, I mean, be my guest. I'm really not bothered. Is it offensive? Will people find it offensive? I'm very sure, but I want it to be there. But that's what Western society was built on. So
Yeah.
you need to learn to take offense, and it is.
Yeah.
And
But before we wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to mention? Because I know it's an hour and a half. It's quite a exhaustive podcast. But before we wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to talk about very specifically in terms of actionable items or solutions?
no, I think so. It's like you said. I think that tactic is to see how the Americans will take this threat, Islamism threat from coming from Canada seriously. Just like they were concerned about border security and fentanyl and so on. Um, whether the Trump administration, as you know, the Trump administration has clearly highlighted Islamist extremism as the biggest security threat to America. Um, and if that is the case, I'm really hoping that they start paying attention to developments north of the border. And because, like you said, uh, the Americans, for all the problems, they at least um, prioritize. You don't, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. What I like about the Americans is they take national security very seriously, unlike in Canada. I'm really hoping that people from the Trump administration um, crack the whip and tell Canadians to get their act together, and also crack down on the so-called charities that essentially moonlight as funding sources for terrorist groups in the Middle East and elsewhere. So, so yes, I think that should stop the abuse of taxpayer money uh, to terror groups elsewhere to conduct terror attacks and destroy the lives of people in the Middle East, especially Muslims, because we know, Kushal, that the biggest
The
victims are
biggest victims are the Muslims
the
themselves.
Muslims themselves. So that needs to stop. So yes, and that's all I have to say for now. Thank you again
All
once again.
right. All right. Once again, Joe, this was a very exhaustive presentation. I'm glad you made it, and I'm glad we could, we could share this. And over the period of time, many and many people are going to look at this. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can follow Joe on X. I have left the X handle um, uh, in the description of the podcast. So whether you're watching this on YouTube or you're going to be listening to an audio version of this presentation, you can go follow him on X. As far as I'm concerned, you know the drill. The Cārvāka podcast is only member driven. I don't even do ad read. So if you can support the Cārvāka podcast, do consider joining the membership program of the Cārvāka podcast, whether on YouTube or on Patreon, whichever platform you prefer. You can also send one-time donations directly to me if you're in India through UPI at kushalmehra at ICICI. And in Canada, the Interac Canada email ID is kushalmehra81 at gmail.com. If you can't do any of that, just keep watching the content, like this video, subscribe to the Cārvāka podcast YouTube channel. If you're an audio listener, leave a rating, buy the merchandise, buy my book Nastic. Every link is there in the description. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, namaste. Take care. Bye bye.